Call to order. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Looks like we must be giving something away tonight. We got a crowd. Welcome to the April 5th, 2018 public meeting of the Hillsborough Township Planning Board. This meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, Sunshine Law. Roll call, please.
Chairman Sarachi, absent. Mr. Wagner,
Here.
Committeeman Belfour, Mr. Pearson.
Mr. Pearson has recused himself due to a conflict with the application, and therefore he's not on the dais.
Ms. Forrest,
Here.
Mr. Julian,
Here.
Ms. Beccarina, Mr. Hestag,
Here.
Mr. Scolo,
Here.
Weinstein, absent. Chairman Klein.
Here. Just a brief announcement. I'd just like to congratulate our fellow member Sally Beccarina on the birth of her first child, Nuella. So that's why she's not here, though. I'm sure she'd love to be here. She's a little busy. But congratulations to Sally on behalf of the board. We'll take our first order of minutes to the deposition, minutes dated February 22, 2018. Copy would be in your packet for those. We'll enter a motion for approval.
Eligible members are Mr. Wagner, Ms. Forrest, the chairman, and Mr. Hestag.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest, Ms. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Hestag.
Yes.
Chairman Klein.
Yes. Next, we have a disposition of resolution for Scott and Gina Ludsky, file 17 PB 10 MSP. Again, a reference copy has been put in your packet.
Mr. the chairman, the vice chair, Mr. Wagner, and Mr. Scobo.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll approve it.
I'll second.
Second. And roll call.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Scolo,
Yes.
Chairman Klein,
Yes.
The vice chairman, Julian.
Vice Chairman Julian.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any planning board business from the floor that is not on today's agenda? Seeing none. Special committee reports, there are none. And also any business from the floor, which we discussed, not on today's agenda, there is none. Next, we'll move to consideration of ordinances. First up would be the Apex Land Association LLC, Apex Sports and Events, File 18 PB01 MSP, Block 175, Lot 23.01, formerly portion of Block 177, Lot 23.01, Mountain View Road. Applicant seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval, submission waiver for submitting in CIS, a tree mitigation waiver to construct a 2,795 square foot indoor athletic and recreation facility comprised of three connecting building components, a 100,850 square foot hard shell main building, 86,400 square foot air supported dome easterly structure, a 22,545 square foot air supported structure to the rear of the property, 3 outdoor synthetic fields, parking and associated stormwater on property governed by the provisions of the Belmead GSA redevelopment plan and amended ordinance 2017.21, EC review of 3/26 of 18. Before we start, Counselor, if I see that we have public here, so if you're called up, please make sure you speak into the microphone because it is being recorded for those who want to watch this and also to help our stenographer correctly put down what you're saying. So with that being said, Counselor.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Alex Fisher. I'm an attorney with the law firm Sabo, Schulk,
Speaking Mike, thank you.
Sabo, Schulk, Gillespie, Ogrodnik, and Fisher in Somerville. I represent the applicant Apex Land Associates LLC. Apex, as Mr. Chairman, you noted, seeks phased preliminary and final major site plan approval to construct a 209,795 square foot state-of-the-art indoor athletic and recreation facility comprised of 3 connecting building components, 2 air-supported domes and 1 hard shell building, as well as 3 outdoor synthetic turf multipurpose fields, one of which is proposed to be grass and then turned into synthetic turf, which is the phasing plan. The project is a permitted use in the zone and requires no variances.
Mr. Fisher, can you lower the mic down just a little lower? Since you look down, it goes out.
Yep. How about that?
That's better, thank you.
Always have an issue.
That's okay.
I have several witnesses with me this evening. First, I'll have Greg Wilkie, who is the principal of Apex. He'll provide some background as to this project and the application. Second, I have Tom Decker, who is the project engineer. He'll provide engineering testimony. Third, I have Eric Sullivan of Sports Facility Management, who will be providing operational testimony. Fourth, I have Gary Dean, the traffic engineer, who will provide traffic testimony. Fifth, I have Phil Clark, the project architect, who will provide architectural testimony. And finally, I'll have Frank Banish, the project planner, who will wrap up the testimony and describes how it fits into and realizes the goals of the township's redevelopment plan. I also have Garth Llewellyn, the project's LSRP, and Ed Cook, the project's environmental consultant, available to answer any questions that the board or public may have related to their areas of expertise. So with that, if there are no questions of me, I'd like to call up Mr. Wilkie and have him sworn.
Please do.
Mr. Wilkie, would you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your full name, spell your last name for the record, please.
Name is Gregory Michael Wilkie, W-I-L-K-E.
All right. Mr. Wilkie, if you would just kind of introduce yourself and Apex and provide some background to this project for the board and the public.
Sure. Good evening. My name is, again, Greg Wilkie, and on behalf of my wife, Jen, there she is, and my other partners, I'm here tonight with my design team to present the Apex Sports and Events project and to answer any questions you or the public have for us tonight. Before I get into the details of the project, I'd like the board and public to know a little more about who Apex Land Associates LLC is and what it is not. It is not a large corporate real estate entity with offices in New York and Hong Kong where facilities such as this gets lost in a large portfolio of projects. It is, however, a business venture amongst 3 residents of Hillsborough, along with 1 sibling. To be more specific, the partners are my wife, Jen, me, my good friend, Tim, all of whom live in Hillsborough, and my brother, Jeff. The management of this facility will be by Sports Facilities Management, or SFM for short, and Eric and Steve are here, and they'll talk in a little bit. I'll let them describe their credentials, but suffice it to say that they are more than qualified to run this facility, having been in the industry and managing similar facilities for over 15 years. So a little more about Jen and me. Jen was actually born and raised in Hillsborough. Currently, we are local residents, having moved into Hillsborough in 2003 to raise our 4 children. And we're local business owners as well, having purchased the old Hillsborough Racquet Club, which is now HRC Fitness, in 2012. As I mentioned, we have 4 children ranging in age from 9 years old to 17. Our family is a very active one, with our kids growing up playing rec and travel football, lacrosse, soccer, and basketball, to name just a few of their activities. So the genesis of the Apex concept came from many, many conversations Jen and I had over the years with friends and other local parents and families. And we're very excited about the opportunity to bring Apex to Hillsborough adjacent to Mountain View Park to create something in Hillsborough that has been needed for quite some time. As Chairman Lapani said, we are proposing to build a 210,000 square foot state-of-the-art indoor athletic and recreation facility, including hardwood courts for basketball, volleyball, and futsal, a kids' adventure area, including play climb and rock climbing, a full-size synthetic turf multipurpose field, a sports performance and training area with batting cages and pitching tunnels, as well as 3 outdoor full-size synthetic turf multipurpose fields. The programs offered at the facility will provide a solution to local and regional sports, recreation, and event needs. The result is a project that assists in the development of athletes, encourages healthy lifestyles, and creates a welcoming social experience for youth, adult, and family participation, as well as making a positive impact on the local economy. Apex is a perfect complement to the outdoor sports and recreation activities that will be offered by the township and the county at Mountain View Park. It's important to note that careful thought is being put into ensuring the best experience for every user, whether an athlete, recreational user, spectator, or entertainment seeker. For local athletes, in addition to the turf and court spaces on which local club organizations can run their practices and play games, Apex will offer a sports performance training area designed to supplement teams' practice time with speed, agility, strength, and conditioning, supervision, and instruction. Now, this sports performance training area is not meant to train individual athletes on an individual fee-for-service basis, similar to personal training. This was a discussion on Facebook. As we all know, there are more than enough local gyms and fitness studios that already provide personal training and small group training services for individuals. Rather, Apex, the concept is to offer an additional training station to fulfill the complete practice and training needs of multiple teams all at one time. And for those seeking recreation and/or entertainment, there'll be other spaces and programs designed specifically for the recreational user and not specifically for the athlete. Again, there was some very good conversation recently on Facebook where the public expressed their desire for additional activities for their kids that are not just sports related. Jen and I completely agree that we want to build a facility that offers the community the best balance between sports, recreation, and entertainment uses, obviously within the constraints of the zoning requirements. One such non-sport activity is play climb area, which is the newest category of action entertainment and is transforming indoor climbing into an exciting and attractive mainstream recreational activity. Play climb and the other permitted entertainment activities will be available for recreational use, birthday parties, school and youth organization field trips, holiday programs, fundraising programs, team building programs, etc. Another key element of the proposed Apex facility is the indoor full-size unboarded turf field that will allow for regulation play in all long field sports such as soccer, lacrosse, football, field hockey, rugby, etc. It will be able to accommodate softball and youth baseball as well. There's no other facility anywhere close to Hillsborough that has an indoor full-size multi-purpose turf field. This field will be able to host and promote a variety of field configurations and competition and training formats across various age groups. The 330-foot by 210-foot field will host all long field sports, training clinics, camps, and competition with the convenience and comfort of being in a controlled indoor environment. The field can be divided into 3 210-foot by 110-foot fields to allow for multiple games and activities all at one time, as well as multiple youth development classes. And in addition to long field sports, as I mentioned, the turf field will be developed to accommodate a 200-foot softball and youth baseball field for competition, clinics, camps, and practices. At this time, I'd also like to highlight 2 other very important aspects of this project. First, it is part of the old, as we know, part of the old GSA depot, which means it is contaminated land in the backyards of so many Hillsborough residents and it is in need of remediation. Second, there are many other approved uses at this location. One being an office complex that theoretically could be over 300,000 square feet with 1,300 parking spaces. So I would ask that everyone here tonight consider the fact that we want to take 40 acres of contaminated soil that could have 1,300 parking spaces built on it, and instead open up to the community a state-of-the-art athletic and recreation facility that supports the development of our youth and an active adult community. In closing, Jen and I wish to thank the board and public for hearing us today. We're especially grateful to the many residents of Oxford Place and other local residents with whom together we have started a dialogue. I've had many one-on-one conversations with the local residents. We also had a town hall meeting last night with those residents who live within 200 feet of the property line. I thought that meeting went very well and it was a very productive discussion. So I thank you all for these conversations. I look forward to continuing the dialogue. And we sincerely hope to be able to address your concerns. And certainly we look forward to integrating Apex into the beautiful community of Hillsborough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkie.
I have no questions of Mr. Wilkie if the
Okay.
board has
All
any.
right. Any questions for Mr. Wilkie from the board that was not answered in his entrance? Okay. Guess we'll make a motion to open to public.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so what we do is we're going to call for people to make comments on the testimony that was just given. So if you have a question specifically to Mr. Wilkie that he can answer and not vis-a-vis maybe something that the testimony of the architect or the planner may give in the future, wait for that question. But if there's something that you have a specific question to Mr. Wilkie on what he just said or what is in his control, I would then invite you up to do that.
I would just note that we do have an engineer, we have someone specifically who will go into detailed operations testimony.
Exactly.
And an architect and traffic engineer as well.
So this would be a time for the scope of what the owner is proposing and have questions for that. So does anyone like to question Mr. Wilkie? Well, we got one. Come on up. Again, please state your name, spell your last and your address, and then into the microphone, any
Good
question.
evening. My name is Doug Schaff, and I live at 79 Oxford Place. I guess the first.
Again, talk into the microphone, and then instead of looking at Mr. Wilkie, talking to the microphone, and then,
My name is Doug Schaff, and I live at 79 Oxford Place. And my first question is to understand exactly where this is going to be placed.
I think that
Do you
where
have a map
the
that would show-
the engineer will be, we'll have an exhibit showing exactly where everything is in the site plan. So that may be better focused towards him.
so there'll be future testimony to answer that question.
Thank you.
And he's up next, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sure, come up. Again, state your name, spell your last, please, and address.
Suzanne Oxy, 425 Willow Road. I'm glad to hear they're local.
Please talk into the microphone
I'm
instead of
glad
looking
to
at the.
hear
yeah.
that they are local people, so they know about the town. I think it's a good idea, in theory. I'm concerned about the parking. You said that it would normally be 1,200 spaces. I think when I looked at the plans, it's something like 800.
We'll,
Is it possible to build a parking deck like the one at Bridgewater Commons, so to reduce the impervious surface and to make it more friendly?
I think that we'll have our engineer answer that.
and operations will address the parking needs for these types of facilities. The engineer can address that, and also the operations witness will address the types of parking needs for these facilities. So,
So the future testimony will be to that end.
I'm asking the owner if he
Okay.
would be willing to consider it.
Can I just make one comment? I believe he said another project could potentially be 12 or 1,300 parking spaces, but his project is not.
I think it's 800.
Right, okay.
So the question, are you familiar with Bridgewater Commons?
Yeah.
That-
I just thought you misunderstood
Yeah.
his
And
testimony.
I think the engineer will discuss how we're well below the impervious requirements, and, he can address, I think, whether or not a parking deck is necessary on this site.
I'm not talking about necessary, I'm talking about good neighbor, reducing the footprint. So the question is to the owner.
Your concern is the impervious coverage? Is that,
Well,
is that the reason to build
So
a?
many spaces all spread out, maybe if you can condense them into a building.
I will have to go with the expert in the advice of my experts that, with, as Mr. Fisher is saying, that absolutely would consider it, but I need to understand from them the limitations, the advantages, all of that. I can't,
So you'll pursue it, you'll look into it, you're saying?
I will ask the question, absolutely, and
Okay.
perhaps the question can be answered tonight by Mr. Decker and Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Goris. I would like to confer with them and see what they have to say, just as Mr. Fisher is saying is, I would need to have that conversation with them just to get their opinion.
Yeah. So what do you think, just gut feeling, is that something?
I believe the site plan as is the best that the entire, engineering team has been able to develop, and I think for many, many reasons, it is the best and works for the clients and I think the neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, two in a row. We'll start with to the left here. And why don't we turn, Mr. White, why don't we turn the mic this way so people can address the witness and look at him? There we go. That might make it easier to get very good.
Hi, I'm George Cox.
Closer to the microphone, please.
Hi, I'm George Cox. I live on Oxford Place. Question is, the fields, will they have lights on them? The outside fields?
The fields will have lights on them, yes.
We, just so you know, we will have specific testimony about the lights from both operations and the engineer.
Okay. I don't know if you've seen the lights on the fields that are going to be next to you. I live behind those, about 200, 300 yards behind that. It's a hell of a thing at night to see that with no obstructions. You talk to the people that are 200 feet away, that's 30 yards. I would imagine they're not too happy about being able to have that in their backyard. I understand that you had another option to put this on another site that ran along 206. And I ask you, might that be a more appropriate location for outside lights, effects of people that lived there before your project started, that were there first?
Well, if I could just interject, that this site is zoned for this use. It's a permitted use there, and as far as I understand, I may be wrong, but there's no other zone that permits this exact use. So,
Yeah, the other site that you are speaking about is, and the original site was on Hillsborough Road, the corner of Hillsborough Road and the bypass. And that was zoned, I believe, farmland. So, yes, there's, as far as I'm aware, no other place in Hillsborough that is zoned properly as this space is that can accommodate the project. On the issue of the lights, I've had extensive conversations with several of the families that are within 200 feet of the property line from Oxford Place. And we've started that dialogue. We have actually a plan that I believe we're going to present in concept tonight to be able to, to help reduce and minimize as much as possible the sight line to those lights. And you will hear, as Mr. Fisher said, you will hear from the operations how these lights work and how they are built these days to minimize the horizontal nature of lights, if you will.
So there'll be different lights than the ones that are existing on the field?
They will be, and
On the
yes,
county-
they will,
on
they
the
will
county
be,
line.
because and I'll just say, because we've had several conversations about this, baseball lights are more horizontal because you need to light up the sky so that when there's a fly ball, the players can see the ball in the sky. And they're not LED, I don't believe, over at the baseball field. Now they make them LED. The long field rectangular sport usage, such as lacrosse and football, those balls are staying close to the ground. The lights are directional to the ground, so there's minimal on the horizontal. So it is a different kind of light. And Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Goris can speak to that more.
I direct this to the council here, that you should take a look some night, if you haven't, at Oxford Place along there, and take a look at the lights that exist already. I find it really hard to believe that, if you cut down that light even by 50%, whether you'd want to live back there or not. That's all I have, I guess. Oh, you mentioned also that you were utilizing land that was contaminated. It's my understanding that that's all going to be fixed, so
As part of this
I don't
project.
understand your point about that.
The point is just that by me doing this project, it cleans up 40 acres of contaminated land, that's all.
That would not have been cleaned up by the government?
It's not being cleaned up by the government, no. So all the work in the north, all the work on the west, that's separate and independent of this 40 acres. The GSA, the feds, the local governments, they are not responsible for, they are not responsible for the cleanup of this site.
So you're
It-
going
it-
to remediate?
I am remediating as part of this project, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had one more over there. Come on up.
Dennis Sataric, also from Oxford Place, 71 Oxford Place. Just a couple comments, one of which I want to kind of reference.
I'm sorry, could you just spell your last name, please?
Sitarik.
Thank you.
My first comment is in reference to the young lady that was up there before. As George, my neighbor, alluded to, we're not really happy with what's going on behind our property to begin with, let alone building a sports complex. But if we get to the point where you're building a sports complex, I don't want another structure like a parking deck that's going to be X90, however high a parking deck happens to be. That, to me, is another eyesore that I have to deal with looking out my backyard. Okay? The only other comment I want to make is you made reference to a town hall meeting. Where is that being advertised? I wasn't privy to that information, that there was a town hall meeting, that apparently there were a lot of people there that were talking about it, apparently in favor of your proposal. Where is this being advertised? When's the next town hall meeting? Where do we get this information so we can come and find out more about the details of what you're trying to do?
Right.
Oh, just know that it's not a official or public meeting. It was just something that Mr. Wilkie held to try to talk to the residents. He can talk about how.
Yeah, I made the decision to invite by letter those residents within 200 feet of the property line. I felt that if I put it out to everybody, that I'm not sure I could handle, so there were 20 residents or 20, I think 24 residents that were invited. I wanted to keep it to that number, just because I thought it was going to be more beneficial, more productive. And then
Also, the 200-foot list is the required notification under the municipal land use law, so it makes sense to follow that.
So for everyone outside of the 200-foot, I anticipated that tonight was going to be really the time to, hear about all of the project and see the diagrams and see the plans and hear. And so I felt like the rest of the Hillsborough community could then listen tonight.
Learn about it here. Okay, since I don't know where the facility is, I can't visualize 200 feet from the facility, so I'll wait for further people to speak, and I'll learn more, and maybe we can back up later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay on the left, in the back,
Let the record reflect Mr. Delcor arrived.
at 8:02.
Hi, my name is Meryl Bisberg, 4 Hickory Hill Road,
Spell the last name, please.
Bisberg.
Thank you.
And I just want to be sure I understand something. This may be the responsibility of the planning board and not Mr. Wilkie, I'm not sure. But he kind of compared...
Talk into the microphone,
He
please.
compared the area in need of remediation to the fact that it was contaminated. My understanding was, that, like this gentleman alluded to before, the contamination was going to be taken care of through the funds that were given by Hillsborough Township and Somerset County to purchase the property, and that certainly before it was developed, we would know that there was no contamination. I believe the definition of an area of remediation isn't necessarily about contamination. It's about other aspects of remediation. For instance, the Emil Road West over here was supposed to need remediation because there were older homes there and some other issues, but not contamination. So maybe it's a question of the planning board. Doesn't the area have to be free of contamination before it's developed? If it's not, how do we have any steps in the process to make sure it's contaminated before the first shovel goes in, if the developer is going to be doing it? Because it's easy to take some shortcuts if you're, if you have to decontaminate the same land you're developing.
I can tell you that's supervised by an LSRP, and he can answer questions about how that process works for you.
And then finally, I think he's suggesting that the land immediately surrounding the land that's going to be remediated and developed is not remediated in terms of being decontaminated yet. So,
I don't think he suggested that.
okay, but we're not, I think there was an allusion to the fact that the area in general, the GSA Depot hasn't been fully decontaminated. So I guess the question is borders and how you would have people coming and going.
Well, that'll all be discussed with the site engineer and how it'll work, so.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Just saying, anyone else on the left? Okay. Okay, to the right. The lady in the back. Again, we're trying to keep testimony to the witness. All the other engineers will be here to answer a lot of the questions that are coming up.
This is for the witness.
Okay.
So my name is Jean Trujillo, spelling is Trujillo. I just have to caveat that I'm a member of the school board, but the opinions expressed here tonight are my own. They're neither authorized by nor do they express the views or the opinions of the school board.
Just take the microphone out and hold it if it's easier for you. This way we...
Okay, so my question, well, actually, I wanted to thank you for engaging the members of the, and 5 Eric Court is my address. So I wanted to thank you for
The
engaging-
microphone, I think, went out. Did it hit the button by mistake here, Mr. White? Yeah, all right, just keep it real close.
Really close?
There you go.
So I wanted to thank you for engaging the neighbors of the project. I think, I don't know if I speak for the audience, but I speak for some of the friends that I've talked to, that everybody's excited about this project, just not in that location. But I understand what you said, that it's a permitted use, so, that's fair. So my question, actually, if you don't mind, in the project summary for the planning report, it says that it's going to be a dome structure. Is the dome structure going to be permanent or seasonal?
It'll be up 12 months a year.
So it won't be taken down?
It will not, no.
So I guess my question is, if you refer to the ordinance from 2017, what's the ordinance? The ordinance 2017-21, it was modified. So one of the, and I realize this is an ordinance that's on the books, but if you go to section 1.6, land use plan and design guidelines, B, permitted principal uses, what's crossed out is seasonal accessory structures. So prior, just a few months ago, this was supposed to be a seasonal accessory structure, not a permanent, the bubble. So that's my comments. If the owner has a comment or response to that.
I mean, that's what the ordinance says. I don't know if there's really a response to that.
Okay, so the ordinance was just changed several months ago.
That's
to reflect this project?
as part of ordinance 2017-21, yes, the word seasonal was removed.
Okay, just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Okay. Over here on the right.
Hi, it's Mike Snowden, 55 Oxford Place. That's Snowdon. I just want to make a broad comment here that we are directly behind where the structure is going to be built. We have been talking to Greg Wilkie around this whole structure, and at this time, you know, myself and my wife do feel comfortable that he will work with us to hide the structure as best as he can and just do ongoing communication, I guess. So that's just kind of open structure question about that.
And I will note that the
Thank you.
engineer will testify as to a plan to provide a significant number of trees in that area. So,
Okay. So any last questions for the witness before we move to the next one? Okay, we'll go to the next one. Thank you, Mr. Wilkie.
all right, I'd like to call up Mr. Decker next. I think we'll have a few exhibits here.
All right.
Tom, do you want to mark that as A1, or? And if you just describe it for the board when you get a chance, and the record.
We give him
And
swear him in first.
Get you sworn in first, or?
Raise your right hand. Testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Indicate your first and last name, spell your last, and indicate your profession.
Name is Thomas Decker, D-E-C-K-E-R. I'm a project engineer with Van Cleef Engineering. I am a,
If you'd like to give your professional and educational background so we can qualify you.
sure. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Rutgers University. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, have been so since 1993. I've appeared before numerous boards, including the Hillsborough Township Planning Board and Board of Adjustment. I currently serve as the municipal engineer in 4 municipalities, 3 in Hunterdon County and 1 in Middlesex County.
Thank you. We'll accept your qualifications.
Thank you.
So if you just want to go up and describe Exhibit A1 for the record and the board.
Sure. Okay. Exhibit A1 is a color rendering titled Vicinity Plan prepared by our office dated March 21st, 2018. What this shows is basically the area of the location of the plans of the site. To get your bearings, Mountain View Road.
Mountain View.
Mountain View Road runs along the bottom portion of the page, as I'm indicating. Oxford Place, which was discussed previously, is in the northeast. North on this map is facing up. To the west, we have the county park, which is where the county had installed the ball fields, had remediated the area. And what we have here in the color rendering is the location of the proposed site. To give the board some background as far as the existing site, because I know that there were some comments raised. The existing site is on the eastern portion of the overall tract of the depot site. It's the westerly portion that the county developed was developed very much in the same manner that we propose to develop the eastern portion with regards to the site remediation. And we do have our LSRP here, but I can go into a little bit of the basics on how that's done. When the county installed the ball fields to the west, they did not remove the contaminated material. What they did was they capped it in place. And by capping, according to the DEP regulations, the capping can occur in a few different manners. It can be hardscaped, pavement, sidewalks, and so forth. Or it can also be capped with a specific thickness of soil. Okay? And that thickness of soil depends on what the activities are going to be there. So that's what they did on this site. So in areas where you have parking, that would be your hard cap of the contaminated areas. Where you have athletic fields, those fields and the grass areas around them, topsoil, clean fill was brought in to cap the material. That's been done under the guidance of an LSRP and complies with the state regulations.
Excuse me, Mr. Decker, could you,
Yes.
for the audience's benefit, describe what LSRP means?
Licensed site remediation professional. Okay, and basically what the LSRP's function is, they basically review the site, provide guidance as far as the remediation, and they have a special, I guess, qualification with DEP where they basically function as DEP's eyes out there to get to process and remediate the site. The county had their own LSRP that remediated the western portion, and the applicant has engaged their own LSRP for the eastern portion. In Mr. White's review letter, he had one comment with regards to remediation. I believe his office also reviewed what's proposed and was satisfied with the remediation measures. So the site has currently several of the foundations from the previous buildings, parking areas, driveways, and so forth still remain on the site. There are partially wooded areas with vegetation, successional growth, some understory. There are also ditches and swales that have been identified on the site, and a letter of interpretation from DEP was issued as part of the county's efforts on the project. That LOI is still valid. The applicant has applied for GP7s, which is basically to fill in those areas. Those areas are a result of the previous development on the site, and we are awaiting the approval of that general permit number 7. There are no streams on the site or within the vicinity, so there's no need for a stream corridor or the application of the stream corridor ordinance to the site. I'm going to change exhibits. This will be Exhibit A2. Exhibit A2 is titled Site Plan, again prepared by our office with the date of January 31st, 2018. It's a color rendering of the site and also shows the proposed landscaping on the site. As Mr. Wilkie indicated previously, there are what's proposed is a 209,795 square foot state-of-the-art athletic and recreation facility. It's comprised of 3 connecting buildings. The hard shell building is located in the, I guess you would call it, the southwest corner of those three buildings. The hard shell is 100,850 square feet. It has a maximum building height of 48 feet 6 inches. Within it, as you heard before, it has 4 regulation basketball courts, mezzanine seating for the basketball courts, play climb area, team and multi-purpose rooms, administrative offices, and a cafe and food preparation area to serve the patrons there. To the east of that is the larger of the two air-supported domes. This dome is 86,400 square feet. It has a maximum height of 75 feet, and it is set 200 feet back from the rear property line. That's its closest distance to any of the property lines is 200 feet, which complies with the redevelopment plan. It is also approximately 400 feet to the house on adjacent lot 37. Again, it will be inflated year-round. It also includes, a 210 by 330 foot all-purpose field, which, as Mr. Wilkie said, can either be single play or it can be divided up into 3 separate smaller fields, and it also has a baseball diamond in it. Lastly, there's a smaller dome to the rear. This dome has 22,554 square feet. Again, an air-supported structure, will be up year-round, has a maximum height of 35 feet. That is 247 feet from the rear property line and 470 feet from adjacent lot 37. And actually, just to be clear, I think my battery's going. Just to be clear, the adjacent property line, as shown on Exhibit A1, between the residential lots and this site is the federal property that's currently being cleaned up. So we do not have a residential property line abutting the subject property.
It's your understanding that that was just replanted as well?
Yes, that's been recently replanted as part of the remediation for that site. Inside of the smaller dome is batting cages, sprinting track, turf, and training areas. On the outdoor, I'm going to move up. Outdoor facilities include 2 synthetic turf fields to the west, adjacent to property that still remains under ownership of the county. These turf fields will be constructed in Phase 1. A third field in the northwest corner will be constructed as a grass field. Under Phase 2, at a future date to be determined, this would also be converted to a turf field. Each of the fields is 225 feet by 336 feet. Again, they would support multiple sports such as soccer, lacrosse, football, field hockey, and so forth. They do have 60-foot high light fixtures. Each field has four poles, 2 on each side, and I'll go into the lighting in a little bit. With regards to the zoning, the site complies with the use and bulk requirements as stipulated in the redevelopment plan. There are no deviations from height, setbacks, impervious coverage, lot coverage. With regards to lot coverage, there is a slight error on the plans with regards to the overall lot coverage. And that is that in the course of designing the stormwater management, the wet ponds are considered as an impervious surface. However, when calculating the lot coverage from a zoning standpoint, how much hardscape you would have on the site, the ponds don't qualify as lot coverage as roof or parking lot would. So the lot coverage is actually under Phase 1, 38.48%, and under Phase 2, 43.54%. Those numbers rise slightly if the banked parking, which I'll discuss in a moment, is installed to the north. But in all cases, we're within the 50% maximum lot coverage for the site. Included in that, in the impervious coverage and the lot coverage for the site, are the turf fields. And I had discussions with Mr. Maskey, the planner, and while the ponds do not count as lot coverage, the turf fields have been classified as lot coverage. And the reason for that is these will be artificial fields that, under Phase 1, these will have liners underneath them. There's a stormwater management component underneath each of the field to attenuate the stormwater. Those will have impervious liners because, again, the contamination of the site, we can't allow water in direct contact with the subsoil. So they're being lined. So that's why the fields have been considered both as impervious from a stormwater standpoint and also from lot coverage. So if we were to put in the hypothetical 30,000 square foot office space with 1,300 parking spaces, that would be a considerable amount more of impervious, and these fields would also be considered, you could have parking occupy the same area as these fields. For a point of access, circulation, and parking, the site is accessed in two locations, from Mountain View Road and also from the drive leading to the county park. Both of those entrances have an entrance lane and then two exits, one dedicated to turn to the left and one to turn to the right. Circulation through the site, we have, if a parent wants to drop off a child or someone at the facility or just drop someone off, they can pull in, say, off of Mountain View Road, come up, and then there's a dedicated drive in front of the building that doesn't have any parking on it. That drive would allow vehicles to come in, drop off at the main entrance, and then circulate and come back out without interacting with the on-site parking. Should someone wish to park, they can certainly, park in any of the available spaces. We have full circulation through the entire parking lot. Fire official has reviewed it, and he's satisfied that from a fire standpoint, there are no issues for circulation. There was one comment from Mr. White in his letter, and that is with regards to the westerly access off of the drive going into the county park. The question was if the county has granted an access easement for installation of that drive. I've checked with Counselor, and we do not believe that easement is in place, but that is obtainable from the county. Total parking. The total required parking spaces for this facility is 794 spaces, so close to the 800 that you heard previously. In an effort to minimize the impervious associated with that parking, the redevelopment plan has a provision for banking of parking spaces. And we can bank up to 20% of the required parking spaces of the hard shell. So in the northern section, you can see kind of in a dashed line up here, is banked parking. What banked parking is it's parking that would not be constructed at this time. It would allow the facility to operate with the 666 parking spaces. The 126 bank parking spaces are reserved so that should the facility need additional parking, that parking has already been approved. It's already been incorporated into stormwater management design, and it's also been incorporated into the maximum lot coverage. So again, as I said before, previously, under Phase 1, we have 38.48%. When we add in the banked parking, that number comes up to 41.48%. And then under Phase 2, when we install the turf field on the northwest grass field, the lot coverage goes from 43.54 to 46.54%. Again, below the 50% that's permitted. The parking spaces, also in an effort to minimize impervious, as has been designed on several other projects in Hillsborough Township, the township ordinance requires 30-foot wide drive aisles and 10 by 20-foot parking spaces. Historically, waivers have been granted for deviations from that to reduce the parking space depth from 20 to 18 feet, where there is a 2-foot overhang in front of the vehicle that's available. So in these grassed areas between the parking, there is at least 2 foot of overhang for each space fronting on those. Likewise, wherever we have a sidewalk that runs in front of a parking space, those sidewalks have been designed to 6 feet rather than 4 feet. The parking spaces still remain, I believe the Environmental Commission referenced that the spaces are proposed at 9 by 18. They are proposed at 10 by 18. So we're only asking for the deviation from the lot, from the depth of the parking space, not from the width. That will remain as 10 feet. Also, one of the things with regards to the banked parking, a question that was raised in Mr. White's letter was, at what point do we determine that this additional parking is needed? What the applicant is proposing is that 18 months after issuance of the CO for the property, that the traffic engineer does another evaluation of the site, parking demands and so forth, and identify if the operation truly needs those banked parking spaces. So that would be 18 months after final CO for the last feature. That's what's being suggested by the applicant to address Mr. White's concern. With regards to the dumpster enclosure, both Mr. White and Mr. Maskey pointed out in their letter that the trash enclosure as shown as 10 by 20 appears to be small for the facility. We've spoken with the operators at SFM, and they concur. And they can provide further testimony on this later, but essentially the site will need 2 6-yard dumpsters for trash and 1 6-yard for recycling. There will be no compactor in there. That was one of the questions Mr. White had. And they anticipate 2 pickups per week and they would occur during off-peak hours. If they have a large event, an event or a tournament, an additional pickup that week would be scheduled. The fields will have trash containers adjacent to them, which will be emptied by staff as needed, and then deposited in the dumpsters. We anticipate this dumpster location to increase by approximately double. So if we're looking at a 10 by 40, that's adequate room to have 3 of these 6-yard dumpsters in there. Each dumpster is about 6.5 feet wide. It gives you 5 feet in between each one of them. Loading areas. A question came up on that, and again, SFM can address this better. But as far as drop-offs, there are, at the rear of the large dome, you'll see this drive that enters in from the north, and there's an area of the dome that extends. What that is, that's a overhead door loading area. The function of the dome, because it's inflated, it's supported by air, and there's air pressure, basically this operates as an airlock. So it's closed on the inside. They open the outside door, a truck pulls in, they close the door on the outside, they open the door on the inside, and then they can enter the building. That would be for deliveries, larger deliveries and so forth into the large shell, and all these are interconnected throughout. As far as deliveries to the, to the soft shell, as far as deliveries to the hard shell, there are two overhead doors located on the northern side of the hard shell between the inflatable dome and the hard shell. So they're screened by the dome from view from the north. And those locations are for deliveries such as, if they're delivering water, soda, other supplies and so forth, they would park within the parking lot, offload by hand cart, and bring into the building. Those deliveries would be scheduled during off-peak hours when the parking lot is not occupied. Most of the parking will occur, in the front portion of the building for access. So that's where the loading is, but again, SFM can discuss that further.
And Mr. Decker, that does not block circulation, right? Because there's another aisle to the west of that.
Correct. It still maintains circulation throughout the parking lot. So if there is a truck that is parked here, and if the spaces are not occupied, chances are he's going to pull over to the curb where those unoccupied spaces are, offload. But if he's in the middle of the aisle, there is still full circulation around the building through the parking lot to the west. Regarding pedestrian circulation, all the sidewalks will be ADA compliant with ADA compliant ramps. Mr. White's asked for some additional detail in areas and spot elevations. We will certainly comply with that. Again, for the most part, we have 4-foot wide sidewalks. We do have some 6-foot where they abut parking spaces to provide that 2-foot overhang. We do have a connection that is proposed from the front of the building, front of the hard shell, that comes down, and it connects to, there's an existing, I'm going to say probably about 8-foot wide walking and biking path that the county put in along their access all the way back and around the circle to access the ball fields. And we're proposing a connection from the front of the building to there. We also provide crosswalk locations to access the fields to the west. That was a comment that Mr. White had in his letter as far as providing access and maybe dedicating some parking spaces to that. We do have accesses at the islands so that they're not going through parking lot, they're at an intersection. They'll be striped. There will be a short section of sidewalk as you get to the turf field, but as anyone who's been to an activity, at one of these fields, typically everybody parks, they get their chair, they go out onto the grass, set up their chairs and so forth on the periphery of the field to watch the game. So there's no walkways or anything like that that go around the turf fields. We also have a sidewalk network that runs around and between the buildings. Those are for emergency exits primarily. As I stated before, each, within the inflatable domes, there have to be airlocks. So where they have, the fewer doors they open, the better. So they do have emergency exits per code, but all the access, most of the access to the dome will be through the hard shell. So you'll be coming in the front of the building and then accessing the domes. And again, the architect and SFM can discuss that more. There was a question in Mr. White's letter with regards to sidewalks and installing a sidewalk along the northern side of Mountain View Road along our frontage. There are no other sidewalks along Mountain View Road. The only walking path that currently exists is along the access to the county facilities. So we're providing a connection from the Apex facility to the county system, but there's really no sidewalk system to the east, if you will, that this sidewalk would be tying into. And as far as comments in Mr. White's letter with regards to additional grading, spot elevations and so forth throughout the site, we'll certainly comply. With regards to stormwater management, as I mentioned before, the turf fields have an underground system. That system is a stone base, and it only collects clean water that comes off of the turf fields. So that's why that's separate. It goes into the stone. We don't have to treat it for TSS removal or anything like that because it is clean. It's treated very much the same as a roof would be. We have 2 wet ponds located along the frontage. They will have standing water in them. They're designed in accordance with DEP regulations. The stormwater management design for the site has been approved by Delaware Raritan Canal Commission. They've agreed with the design system proposed, that it satisfies their requirements and DEP's requirements. These ponds will have standing water. They'll also have an aerator in each one of them. They are interconnected with a pipe that runs underneath the easterly access drive. And we thought that, and they'll also be lined because, one, for the to maintain the water elevation, and 2, because of the soils. We felt that having wet ponds in the front would be an amenity to the facility rather than a conventional surface detention basin, which is basically a large depression in the front yard. This way we have at least a site amenity to a water feature. Mr. White had suggested also that the applicant consider stocking the ponds with some kind of a fish to help control insects and weed growth and so forth, and I believe the applicant is taking that under consideration. They'll consider the use of fish. Water quality has been reduced per state and local requirements. Runoff quantity has been reduced to 50%, 75%, 80% of the 2, 10, and 100-year storms. Groundwater recharge is not permitted on the site because of the contaminated soils. So in most cases, what you'll hear stormwater management, they have 3 components: stormwater quantity, stormwater quality, and groundwater recharge. We're actually prohibited from doing the groundwater recharge here. The drainage from the basins and from the turf fields is collected in a drainage system throughout the site, and it discharges to the west of the westerly entrance, and it discharges towards the access drive to the county parks. Mr. White had raised a question as far as the capacity of the downstream drainage facilities, and we're currently working with the county for the county to provide their calculations for when their drainage system was installed under their driveway to demonstrate that we have adequate capacity. So we will be providing that to Mr. White once we get it from the county. Lighting. Oh, let me back up. Other utilities. The site will be served by the sanitary sewer. Sanitary sewer line will be coming down through the southeast corner of the building, through the easterly access drive and connect to the existing system on Mountain View. It will also be served by, electric and so forth. The stormwater management or the stormwater collection system is a series of drainage pipes. What we've done to enhance stormwater quality is that all the inlets, wherever possible, are installed in the grassed area with curb breaks along the parking area to allow the water to drain through the curb break into a grass swale, then into the inlet. So it gets some treatment in the grass. This is very similar to what the county did between their parking areas to the west. Lighting. For the building and the parking lighting, we have 15-foot tall LED lights throughout the site in accordance with the township ordinance. We have demonstrated in our lighting plan that we have 0-foot candles at the property lines. That's one of the ordinance requirements, is that we do not have light spillage into, over any of the property lines. The only area where we will have some spillage is going to be to the west, and that would be spillage onto the county property, which is also zoned for a future development. Could be recreation, could be something else within the redevelopment plan. Mr. White requested that we adjust some of the pole locations so that they fall in alignment with some of the parking striping, so that when you're pulling your car in, you're not pulling up to a light fixture. The light fixture is actually off to the side, and we'll comply with that. We'll shift that around to Mr. White's satisfaction. Again, the field lights are 60 feet in height. Again, it's the same height that we have at the ball fields at the county. They are currently designed, the design that was chosen were the same light fixtures as the county. As Mr. White correctly points out, we should go with LED lights. They're more cost-effective, more environmentally friendly, and we will revise the light fixtures to be LEDs. As Mr. Wilkie indicated before, the lighting on the turf fields is different than the baseball fields. The height of the lights is at 60 feet because, as you can imagine, you have to light the center of the field. And it was indicated we're not looking at high-fly balls that the athletes need to keep track of. For the most part, the balls are at a fairly low level. So these light fixtures are able to be tilted more to the horizontal than the baseball fields are over here, because you want those light fixtures to shine down onto the field, not so much lighting up the sky. Each field, again, has 4 lights, 2 on each side, and that's for all 3 fields. The intention for the lit fields is that they would only be used when only be on when those fields are being used, and I believe the applicant will be looking for them to be lit up to 11 o'clock at night. Mr. White also asked that we provide fall zones for the lights, which would be 60 feet from the center of the pole. We'll certainly add those to the plan for the board's consideration. When I took a look at this at the office, the fall zone for the lights adjacent to the parking area would encroach, if one fell, at the most it would encroach 12 feet into a parking space. So it would not go into a travel lane or anything like that. It would fall within a parking space. Landscaping. Native species have been proposed in the landscaping plan as required in your ordinance. There were several comments in Mr. White's letter about changing of species. We will certainly work with Mr. White's office to make those changes and satisfy his landscape architect. He did have some valid comments, and we'll certainly work with them. We also had, as was testified earlier, Mr. Wilkie had some meetings with the residents. We also had a meeting with the Environmental Commission, and there was significant discussion with regards to buffering in the northern area adjacent to the lots on Oxford. And what the Environmental Commission had asked, and it's in their review letter, is that the applicant consider preserving some of the trees, existing trees, along the northern area. So after consideration, and this will be Exhibit A3. Thank you. This plan is titled Proposed Buffer. It's prepared by our office, and it's dated April 5th, 2018. We prepared this today in response to the meeting that Mr. Wilkie had last night. And what we're proposing, this is a blow-up area of this northern section. What's being proposed, based on a site walk that occurred yesterday morning, it was identified that there is a significant stand of trees in here that would provide a significant amount of buffer to the domes and the hard shell, as well as the athletic fields. So what's being proposed, what we'd like to propose, based on those discussions, is that we preserve a 1.3 acre section of these trees in this area, and we would extend that to the east. There are no really trees in here. The trees in this area are really of very low quality, nothing that you'd really keep, a lot of scrub. But extend it here, this would be completely fenced. And what the applicant proposes to do is to bring in a tree spade, and for any of the existing trees that are in decent shape that would, in the area that we would be removing as part of the improvements, to take those trees and move them into some of these infill spaces to help plug some holes and add to the buffer. These trees, we've got, within this area are 72 trees. So we'd be looking to preserve 72 trees, and they range in size from 6 inches to 24 inches. They're primarily, they're cedars. There are a few good-sized oaks in there and some other deciduous trees. So that, and then in this area here, we would also try to relocate as many trees as we can into that area to, again, supplement that buffer in this area. The fence that would enclose this would be a solid fence, so that provides additional buffering. Again, we're not looking to hide the structure. We understand it's 75 feet tall, but if we can break it up with some existing trees, a 24-inch oak that stands, 30 or 40 feet tall is a lot better than us clearing all of this, putting in 4-inch caliper trees, and wait another 20 years for them to mature. Along the rest of the northern property line, the applicant's proposing to continue the 6-foot-high fence going around. Now, one of the things, just so that the board understands, by preserving this wooded area, that means that this area is not being remediated, okay? Because we can't put in a foot, 2 feet of soil in that area without killing the trees. That's one of the other purposes for having the fence go around it. So this becomes a fenced-in area. It becomes, it goes into the deed to identify its location. The LSRP is advised that this is completely compliant with DEP regulations as far as protecting that area and identifying it. The fencing also will help. I understand that there may have been some concerns with neighbors as far as, passing through between the properties. So the fence along here will certainly help with that. And lastly, with regards to landscaping, I believe Mr. Wilkie has spoken with a few of the residents along Oxford and about the possibility of planting some additional evergreen trees on their property to help, again, plug in some of the holes in the existing landscaping. The closer that you plant evergreens to the point of eye, the more that it obscures. So the closer you can plant some evergreens to the actual homes, they'll get more benefit from the angle. And I believe Mr. Wilkie is prepared to install up to 100 trees, evergreen trees, on off-site properties.
6 to 8 feet evergreen?
Yeah, 6 to 8 feet evergreens. And
I know,
again,
I know when
those
we
would be
were-
cited, I'm sorry.
I know when we were talking about this at the Environmental Commission, I mean, it was a visual thing. So in terms of being able to kind of compensate or block some of the, you know, the homeowners from seeing the dome or the lighting from it, I know we were talking about that idea and/or a berm, so, you know, in terms of consideration, I mean, it's all about the visualization, so it's hard to kind of conceive the visualization. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but that was part of the discussion.
If you could explain also the natural, is there natural berming in the area to be
There's
preserved?
there's a bit of a rise from the site into this area that sits. It's not a defined berm, if you will, like you would see a normal landscape berm. It sits a little bit higher than the site here by a few feet, but it's more the height. The elevation of the back here is very similar to the elevation of the adjacent lots. The other thing that was there were other trees that were identified as being potential trees that we could save, and those were some trees that are located within what we've got designated as land bank parking. We could certainly take a look, and if we can accommodate the equivalent number of parking spaces that we would have here and move them to another location, we could also consider saving some of those trees there. But we'd have to take a look and see if we can work things around.
I mean, just going back and just doing that visual test, I mean, then you're gonna get a better idea of what you need to do. You know, it's, like I said, it's hard to kind of like look at it on a map, but I think if you go out there and do that visual test and then make those decisions based on that, it's probably a good way to
Okay,
consider.
is there, how,
I don't know, like, but
are
I
you
think it was just.
suggesting a cross-section or something like that
Yeah,
that
or
shows?
from the neighbor's standpoint, you know, doing that visual test.
Okay.
But if I remember correctly, you know, I think the berming from the Environmental Commission, didn't that assume that all those trees would be going?
Correct.
Right. Yeah,
So,
so it's a good idea.
I know,
but-
I'm assuming they're all relatively tall
Correct.
trees.
Yes, they are.
Currently, which probably creates a better effect than a berming with a new planting.
Correct. I mean, we would berm this, we would not, you know, when you berm, you add a few feet to the
Right.
height of the trees when they're planted, but when you're looking at planting 8-foot trees, we're not looking at putting a 15-foot tall berm
Right.
here. You're looking at like a 3-foot high berm, you'd get maybe 11 feet at planting of the trees, whereas most of these are deciduous, so you have a canopy. So if we can take some of the existing evergreens from elsewhere on site and move those into those locations to kind of fill in under the canopy.
Sure.
And we would also be able to relocate larger than 8-inch trees, or 8-foot trees.
No, I agree with that.
Okay. That's all I had.
Are there any questions from the board for,
I'll just ask with the, obviously, the new plan that when Mr. Wilkie met with the neighbors, are they aware of the trade-off that if they were to do this area, that site would not be remediated, and how do they feel about that? And is that something that we can allow?
Under the program, yes, you can.
Okay.
And it's actually not your purview, it's DEP's purview in the end.
Okay.
The LSRP and our LSRPs looked it over and are in agreement that basically this can be done, has to be deed restricted and fenced in, so people can't come in contact with it to make it safe for everybody.
So fence has to be maintained?
Correct. And probably has to have a sign on it too, to warn
Okay.
everybody.
You want to come up, Mr. Wilkie, and answer that?
And this might be better for,
Still under oath, Mr. Wilkie.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
You're still under oath.
So, yes, absolutely. Mr. Llewellyn might be able to speak a little bit better to this, but the fencing around that area does, it is remediated, correct? The fencing is an approved method by the DEP to cover that area.
Okay. I just thought that might come up when questions, get it now. Well, hold on, you're not in testimony, so maybe we'll bring that up if we have to.
I think it's called an engineering control, but you can verify that, correct?
Okay.
Yes, that would be an engineering control.
Thank you, engineering control. Any other questions from this?
Just a quick question. On the third field, you said even though that's going to be Phase 2 for the turf,
Yes,
it'll be Phase 1 for the lighting, correct?
correct.
Okay, so that'll be up, even though
The
it's
lighting
grass?
The lighting will be up.
Okay.
You mentioned the tall trees and moving some of those. Would
Yes.
it be strategic to have those in an area where they might block some of that lighting, if any of the lighting is,
Yes,
maybe
when,
that's what you're saying.
when the trees are being located, they'll be, and we can certainly work with Mr. White's office and Mr. Maskey out in the field to, and the neighbors, to identify, areas that are best suited. We certainly want to utilize the trees as best as we can.
And I think we discussed that environmental, just to be, the ponds in the front, they'll be fenced, even though the...
Yes, they're required to have a
Yes.
fence around them. They're also required, wet ponds have a safety ledge design so that if anyone should be around the edge of the pond and they happen to fall into the water, it's a very shallow ledge adjacent to that area, so they're not falling into a deep pond.
All right, so we're going to give Tina a 5-minute break here before we get to public, because I figured that'll go on for a while.
I have some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
before we go to public.
All right.
Maybe we can do it after
All
the
right.
break if you want.
No, go ahead.
Do it? Okay. I may be asking you to repeat some of your testimony, but just
That's
to
fine.
clarify things. Firstly, on page 3 of my memo, I had asked that you demonstrate how the height was calculated in conformance with the formula that's
The-
in the ordinance.
The architect will testify to that when he comes up.
Okay. Parking, you are allowed to bank 20%, but will you be providing testimony as to why you don't need that 20%
Yes.
from day one?
Yes, that'll be testified by,
Operations will be testifying as to other similar facilities and why it's not needed.
Okay. We had asked for details of the crosswalk treatments. The redevelopment plan requires textured crosswalks wherever public pathways intersect with vehicle traffic.
we'll comply with that.
You'll comply. Loading. Can you go over the loading process again? You said there's a loading area behind the large dome, is that correct?
Correct.
And what type of trucks are going in there? What size?
I would, the operations will probably we'll be going through more of the
It's time for you to go home, I think, Mr. Decker.
They'll be going through in detail what types of trucks they expect where. and
Okay, well,
what
maybe it's
times
the
of
answer to
day.
this next question, too. You mentioned that on the west side of the complex, the delivery trucks would just be parked in the drive aisles. Can you come up with a better solution than that?
Is that someone for operation?
Could we come up with something different?
Would you?
Would we?
You're talking about, you're supposed to provide adequate loading spaces, and you're talking about loading any traffic aisle, correct?
Correct.
That doesn't seem to meet the ordinance. Unless you're asking for another waiver.
Well, the only thing I can offer is that we do have the secondary access going around, so we provide,
I don't know, what does that mean?
so that, should a truck be parked in this
All right, but
location?
you're still parking a truck in the aisle. I'm asking you, can you get the truck out of the aisle?
Can we get the truck out of the aisle?
Yes.
The truck could pull over to the side if there's no park.
Will you
if there's
provide a
no-
loading zone of some sort?
Yeah, we'll provide a loading zone.
Thank you.
Basically, we'll eliminate some of the parking spaces in there and provide.
And
a
you'll relocate
loading
them
zone.
elsewhere, and still meet the parking requirement?
Correct.
Thank you. Signs, someone else is going to talk about signs?
Yes, the architect will talk about signs.
Okay. Could you describe the enclosure for the trash again? What's going to be
Yes.
constructed of, landscaping, et cetera,
The-
around the trash enclosure?
The trash enclosure will be we'll have a solid fence around it. There was a comment in, I forget, I think it was Mr. White's letter, that it not be a wooden fence. It would be a vinyl fence, 6 foot high. It would encompass the trash enclosure, would have a solid gate in front of it to obscure the view. There is landscaping proposed around the
the dumpster enclosure. That will be continued with the expanded enclosure. And those trees are currently proposed to be Norway spruce, and we would certainly work with the
So the materials that you're talking about, you said, what kind of fence? Plastic?
Vinyl.
a vinyl.
Okay, will
Solid
that meet
fence.
the requirement that collection enclosures shall be designed with durable materials with finishes and colors that are unified and harmonious with the overall architectural theme of the development? In other words, it'll match the building somehow?
That would be a question for the architect.
Okay. Can you demonstrate how the collection vehicle would get in and out? Are they going to be front-loading the dumpsters or back, or how?
So the question is, with the dumpster location here, how are they accessed?
Correct.
When we enlarge this dumpster location, what we plan to do is, right now it's kind of on a curve with an angular entrance. What we propose to do is to move that so that it's squared off more with the parking spaces, and then the garbage truck can either pull in, come around the back, pull in, pick up the trash, or if it comes in from the other area and it's a rear load, they can back in.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if you addressed comment number 9 at all about electrical and mechanical equipment and how it's going to be placed and how it's going to be screened, et cetera.
I believe that's, the architect will address that.
Okay. This is as much, comment number 11, this is much Bill White's as mine, but as is standard procedure, we get right-of-way dedication. Bill, did you find they needed to dedicate any of the right-of-way to Mountain View? It varies from 33 feet wide to 66 feet wide over its course.
And typically, that type of road requires a 60-foot right-of-way. They're already giving you over 30 feet,
They are.
30 feet or more of half-width, so there's no dedication necessary.
There isn't any?
No.
Okay. Comment number 12, interface with the county park. You touched on it slightly. Is there an walk me through it. How does someone want to, I can see how they could drive from the county park to your facility, but if somebody wanted to walk or bicycle from one place to the other, how would they do it?
Again, this is Exhibit A1. Along the length of the drive that the county put in to access Mountain View Park, adjacent to that is an 8-foot wide walking, biking trail. So it keeps the vehicles and pedestrians off of Mountain View, the Mountain View Drive, or Mountain View Park Drive. Our connection, shown on A2, comes out the front of the building and then connects. We have, again, a wide access point that comes down and connects to that existing walkway. It would then continue, that walkway comes all the way up to the intersection of Mountain View Road, and it continues to the west. We would be proposing a crosswalk at our westerly intersection, and then that path continues, again, on A1, that continues, there's a circle, traffic circle in the park. That pathway then continues around, and it comes down into the back of the ball fields and connects to the walkways to the ball fields. It also continues along that access drive on the northerly side of the access drive.
Okay. Is there, I believe there is there a fence currently along the western property line between the county property and this property?
Here?
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Is that the county's fence or your fence?
That fence, well, right now it's the county's fence.
Okay.
Because the county still owns the property.
Right.
That fence is there primarily because the westerly section of the property has been remediated.
Okay.
The easterly section is not, so the entire 40-acre easterly section is enclosed by a fence.
Okay, so there is a possibility in the future to have better connections through that area rather than walking out to the roadway to get
Yeah,
from one to the other.
if this is developed at some point.
Right. Okay. And then all the comments on the building design standards, I guess, would be the architect, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then you'll, the fence you're adding now along the property line, you'll provide us with a detail of what the fence would
Yes.
look like, et
Yes.
cetera. There was one last question on the Environmental Commission report that didn't get addressed. They were looking into baffling the fans used to inflate the domes to reduce the noise levels. Can you speak to that?
I believe the architect is going to address that.
Okay. That's it for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Messi. Mr.
White.
White?
In your testimony, you stated about the trigger for the construction of the bank spaces being your traffic engineer. I think the redevelopment plan puts it on the planner and planning board to decide
That's correct.
if it's actually needed, so.
That's correct.
Put your mic over, Mike.
Sure. Speaking about the construction of the bank parking spaces, what the trigger would be to make them be constructed, it was spoke about that the traffic study would be done, but in case the redevelopment plan already speaks to that and says that the planner and the planning board decide when those spaces, or if those spaces are ever needed.
That's correct.
We were just offering a method of providing further information to the professional staff and the board on a future date, if that's helpful. If not, if you want to do it, that's, you know.
Is the applicant willing, 2 items, it's my turn, the applicant willing to add as a condition to this approval that they will seek planning board approval for the bank parking spaces?
We were hoping not to, as part of.
I would suggest you can have a conversation with your client about that.
You mean seek approval right now for the
No.
bank?
No.
At the appropriate time, seeking the bank parking would require a reappearance before the planning board to approve, to get it.
Can we address that after the 5-minute break?
Absolutely. And the second item, I believe that the engineer testified to was the access easement from the site onto Mountain View Park Drive. That needs to also be a condition of approval that you obtain that access easement from the county and provide the township with a copy of same.
That is fine.
Thank you. I have nothing at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, so we're going to take a 5-minute break, so we'll come back at 9:15. Right. Okay, we're back in session. It's 20 after. Just a little housekeeping before we go to public. Is our policy we don't start any new testimony after 10 o'clock. Obviously, there's a lot of information here, so there will be a second meeting. So just to give you an idea of where we're going to be, if there's a testimony that's going to finish maybe shortly after 10, we'll continue, but we'll leave that up to the discretion of the counselor. But just so you know, we'll probably have to come back again. So at this point, we're opening to the public any testimony given by the engineer. Again, remember, we have other testimony coming, so try and keep your questions to the testimony that Mr. Decker gave, excuse me. So we'll start on the left side. Anyone on the left? All right, come on. You were first last time, so you keep it consistent. Just, again, repeat your name and address, and spell your last
My
name.
name's Doug Schaaf, 79 Oxford. Last name is Schaaf.
Thank you. Just hold the microphone close to your, it's very sensitive.
You talked about saving 72 trees here. How many trees are being taken away by this property?
Okay. He'll come over and use the same mic and share and point.
The 72 trees, I'm going to swap out the exhibit again.
When we're putting A3 back up, is that correct?
Yes.
A3.
This is Exhibit A3. The 72 trees are in this area outlined in red. That would remain.
Understood.
And then, sorry?
How many are being taken away?
Yeah, one person, a microphone at once, please.
How many trees are being taken away by the property here?
Well, because of the capping of the site, originally it was going to be all of the trees. If you want a final number, I can look at the plans and give you that.
Again, don't ask a question because you got the mic.
Right.
So
We're going to find out that number for you.
And I guess the question is, what happens to all the wildlife that's there?
I'm not the environmental consultant to address
Wrong guy again.
to address the habitat. We do have an environmental consultant that can answer that question at that time.
What my concern with that is, as the GSA has already cleared the property over here, all those habitat is now moved into our neighborhood. So as we're clearing more here, I don't know what the implications of that is. If this proposal goes through, when are you planning on clearing these trees?
The trees would be cleared as part of the initial operation, part of the initial construction of the site. So one of the first things it would have to do is basically clear all of the trees. You mean as far as a date? Well, it's going to depend.
It depends on when the permits are
Just to be
issued.
clear, if the question is about timing for issues related to DEP permits, Mr. Cook can address that if you're talking about species on the site.
Right. And I think the question is, at what date, when would we be looking to clear the trees on the site? That would be dependent on if the board grants approval, when they grant approval, and breaking ground. As far as breaking ground, we're hoping for.
Again, it is dependent on approval, but from my perspective, everything's pretty much in place. So once approval is there and I'm allowed to put a shovel in the ground, then I'll do that. The hope, as I've mentioned before, we're looking to get the turf fields constructed and operational by spring of next year. In order to do that, we would need to put a shovel in the ground August, September of this year.
The reason I ask that is my understanding there's fish and wildlife regulations that say trees cannot be cut of a certain size between the months of April and I guess it's October.
Mr. Cook will address
Yeah, well-
exactly this matter.
It's not for this testimony.
I can have Mr. Cook answer your question.
We have an environmental consultant, Mr. Cook, who's here who can answer that.
Not now.
Next guy, I get it. Last thing I have is there's going to be lights on these fields here, correct? I live over on Oxford, as I said, and right now, from the ball fields, I get lights in my house. I welcome you all to come have dinner at my house in the evening. Just let me know when, because my wife gets upset if I surprise her. But the lights come in our dining room in the evenings, and I'm concerned we're going to have more lights now. And on top of that, you're talking 11 o'clock at night. We have children in the neighborhood that go to sleep. And to run a business, it's 11 o'clock at night, that's now a quality of life issue. We have property value issues. I don't think anybody seated here, with all due respect, would like a big egg in their neighborhood. And that's got to have an impact on property values. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else on the left side? All right, lady in the first stood up, so quick feet get the seat.
Christine McAvoy, MCAVOY, 142 Mountain View Road. I'm literally across the street from Pond A. My question is the fencing, you're talking about fencing around the ponds. Could you be a little bit more specific about that, or is that an architect question?
No, I can answer that.
Okay.
I can do that one.
I can do that one. The fencing around the pond is a 4-foot-high split rail fence that has like a wire running around it. So
Microphone? No, closer.
She's got it.
How's that? There?
There you go.
Okay. The fence surrounding the ponds will be essentially a split rail fence, 3-rail, 4-foot high. It needs to have a wire mesh included in that, so it's not a climbing fence. And then it will have a gate for maintenance vehicles and so forth, to go in and access and maintain the pond.
Okay, and my other question is, you're leaving trees towards Oxford Place. I attended the town hall meeting, that wasn't a town hall meeting, the meet and greet.
Right.
And I learned that the plan is to remove the trees on Mountain View and then plant different landscaping in front of the pond. Is there any consideration to how, like, because as you said, when you look at something higher tree-wise, it kind of gets your eye level to the tree and not the egg in the back. I was wondering if there's any way to keep some height that's across the street from my house.
You're correct. The trees are being removed on the site. And to answer the gentleman's question before, the number of trees that are being removed, 485 evergreens and 534 deciduous trees. We are planting 199 evergreens and 358 deciduous. These numbers were calculated before the 72 trees that we're proposing to save. So the removed rate comes down. But to answer your question, yes, the trees in the front are being removed. We are proposing street trees in accordance with the township ordinance, as well as additional plantings for the buffer in accordance with the ordinance. Leaving the trees that are there isn't feasible based on the property. We'd have to have we would have to enclose that with a fence all the way around, and the ordinance actually requires that we have street trees and so forth along Mountain View Road.
So by removing the trees, you don't have to have a fence around the trees, but if you left the trees, you have to provide a fence around the trees?
Yes. The reason for that is we have to remediate the site, okay, from the contamination. That's accomplished in a number of ways, either by capping or another form of remediation is to fence in the contaminated area. If we leave the trees, we can't cap the area because as soon as we put a layer of clean material on top of the tree root structure, it kills the trees. So
So
that
you're
area,
killing the trees to save trees? I understand what you have to do legally-wise. I'm just aesthetically, I would prefer not to look out at a beautiful pond and then a dome without trees in front that I have now. I have like 8-foot tree, I have an 8-foot barrier now. And it'll take 30 years to get an 8-foot barrier now.
Do you have the heights of, I don't think it'll take 30 years to get 8 feet from the plantings proposed, right?
no, the trees.
Well, I'm not going to get anything, I'm getting a pond.
No,
No, we're planting trees. We're planting trees along the entire frontage. We're planting shade trees as well as other buffer plants along the entire frontage. These green symbols along the bottom, those are all proposed trees. They're all proposed trees, proposed deciduous street trees and other plantings to provide a buffer in there. So
So right now, the trees that are there are cedar trees, evergreen trees, no leaves. I don't have to rake up leaves from these trees. I'm hoping that the trees that get planted, some consideration will be taken into the fact that they are the same type of tree that doesn't shed leaves in the fall, that I will be now raking up every, time the wind blows.
well, the township ordinance requires that we install shade trees. Shade trees are deciduous trees that are going to have leaves. So in order to comply with the township ordinance, we do have those planted along there. So there will be more
Well,
deciduous
we
trees.
make waivers for everything else. Can there be a waiver for the trees?
Something I'm sure that
Something
if
to
we could
consider.
ask and consider, but I mean, I'm looking at the plan here, I see, and it's hard to read this miniature writing there, maybe the architect, when it comes up, can answer your question specifically as to what trees are planted there. But it looks like there's more than just trees, it looks like there's some sub-shrubs underneath it also.
Yes.
To create a better buffer, but I think that when the architect comes up with a plan.
I just know how the wind blows, because
It always blows to your house.
It always blows.
And everyone's house.
No, but,
I
I get all
understand.
the litter now from the park,
Okay.
and,
No, that-
everything else now.
And that would actually be a question for us. We did the landscape plan.
Okay.
So what's proposed, the street trees in those areas, we have a few maples, and a hawthorn that are the street trees. And then the other plantings that we're looking at are Japanese black pine, Serbian spruce,
Those are evergreens.
American holly. Those are all evergreens.
Okay.
Okay, so there are evergreens mixed in there. So the idea is that you have the deciduous trees with the leaves that get a height to them, that provide a buffer at a higher elevation, and then you have the evergreen trees at a lower to basically fill in the lower profile of the trees. So there are a series of lower evergreen trees in there. And by lower, I mean, let's say, they're 6 foot high at time of planting.
It's a two-tier planting, so you have the trees in the front, and then behind that is your evergreen. So you're going to have the tree look, so you're going to have some leaves, unfortunately, but as far as aesthetically, if you're not want to see the building, but also remember the evergreens will act as a wind buffer, so you won't have that wind coming through and maybe possibly
Well, I
blowing
have
all
a
the
wind
leaves.
buffer right now. There's trees.
Well,
There's plenty of them.
the wind buffer will prevent the leaves from blowing over as much.
Okay, and my other question is probably more for the planning board. Like I said, I've lived through every aspect of what's been going on over there, and over the years, I've had, when it was GSA, we had dump trucks up and down the street all night long, running, all night long, and the town answer was, I'm sorry, it's government, we can't do anything about the noise of the trucks running all night. And then when it came to county, it was bulldozers starting at 4 a.m. every morning because they had to warm up to get started for the day. And again, it was government, so there was nothing other government could do about it. So this is now going to be private. So my question is, are there rules in effect for when work has to start and stop for a private industry as opposed to what goes on when it's government?
I mean, I can answer that there are, as a township ordinance that limits the hours of construction. And-
For private as opposed to?
And we'll comply with that.
Okay, thank you.
As well as noise.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Dennis Sitarik, Sitarik, 71 Oxford Place. Can you give consideration to, I mean, lights are a problem now with the county fields. Lights are going to be a problem here as well. When you start talking about the third field, the upper field, I call it the third field, I don't know if it's the third field or second field, but the upper field, that's the closest one to property lines on 71 Oxford Place. When you look at the banked parking, that too is now close to Oxford Place. That too will have lights on it, should that come to fruition. You have to have lights and bank parking. I'd like to give some consideration to moving that third field and moving where that bank parking would be so that it would not be that close to Oxford Place. That would alleviate a lot of a good portion, some portion of the light concerns, concerns that we have. So we can move that, I don't know what that area to the right of the complex is. It looks like a green field of I'm not sure what. Maybe some consideration can be put in moving the bank parking and that third field over to that side, again, for the lighting. The other question I have is, I didn't hear anyone talking, maybe it wasn't your position to talk about it, the traffic flow on Mountain View, or even in the whole area now with the Somerset County ball fields there, and in the summertime from, as you know, from April to September, they generate a lot of traffic. I would suspect that Mr. Wilkie would like a lot of traffic coming to his complex for a variety of reasons. I haven't heard anyone talk about how we're going to manage the traffic flow. Mountain View Road right now is not a very wide road.
We have a traffic engineer who will testify.
Thank you.
That'll probably be the next meeting, by the way.
Pardon me?
That traffic consultant will probably be the next meeting.
Okay, we'll come for that then. I guess the other comment is, you talked about a berm, and I know what a berm is because I have one in my backyard now because of what the county has done with the remediation. The concern I would have with any berm is water runoff and ensuring that whatever water that does get generated that would run off, there's some kind of way to capture it on the side of the complex and not on the side of Oxford. because right now we have water that runs onto the properties in Oxford Place. You build the berm, you got to control where the water flow is going to go.
I think the proposal that they proposed would be in lieu of the berm, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, the current proposal would be in lieu of the berm that was suggested by the Environmental Commission, we would preserve the existing trees at their current elevation. Okay, which that elevation is similar to, almost the same as the elevation back at the houses, because it's kind of flat in here, and then this drops down a little bit. So there is no, there is no
Drop
berm.
down, it would drop down into
Yeah, it
towards
drops
the
down.
complex.
It won't affect the drainage patterns, because we're not changing the drainage patterns in here.
Okay, and that fence you're proposing there, describe that fence for me.
The fence will be a solid fence, probably a vinyl, 6-foot-high fence, you know. It's not going to be a chain link fence or anything like that.
And the fence
It'll be an attractive.
Maintained by Mr. Wilkie and whoever runs the
Correct.
complex.
Correct.
And so, from an Oxford Place perspective, what I'm now looking at is a fence that would be behind this proposed complex, and now I'm also going to have a fence that the county's putting up so that I can't get onto the property they're remediating. So I'm looking at 2 fences with an area in between that's all going to be trees.
You're saying that they're putting in a fence in here as
The
well?
county is putting when they finish the remediation, GSA, whoever, county, I'm not sure but they will finish the remediation, and there was a fence there, which they took down.
Mhm.
They're going to reinstall another fence. So I'll have a fence in my backyard that the county's putting in, and now I'm having another fence in my backyard, maybe 200 feet further, I'm not sure what the distance is there, but there will be 2 fences in my backyard.
Do you know what type of fence they're putting in the GSA?
I think it's like a chain link fence. Planning board would probably know. I don't know for sure, but there was a chain link fence. I think it's a chain link fence.
I don't know what it is either. All I can tell you is that the fence that we're proposing is going to be a solid fence. And from your view, the fence along the property line is pretty much going to obscure, along with the trees, the view of the fence on the other side of the trees.
Yeah, that fence is because it's still a contaminated area, so it's an engineering control to kind of keep people out of there, but it acts as a buffer, you know, to act as a visual impairment for the sight line. So it's kind of like you gotta make a choice.
Okay, so I understand because that was said earlier, so I understand that, but why, I guess maybe the final question is, the GSA remediated a lot of acreage behind our property, and that was mandatory, had to be remediated, and consequently, I won't bore you with the details, how much we suffered over the last 2 years, but why does this property here not have to be totally remediated? And I understand you can build fields on it, and that covers it up and so on, but why does this property not have to be totally remediated, similar to the other property?
Let me have our LSRP address
Yeah.
that, actually, because he can explain how the various methods of remediation and what the DEP calls for, so. All right.
But I hear what you just said, but hopefully I'll get the answers why it doesn't have to be remediated in general.
He will explain why it
Okay.
is being remediated.
It is being remediated.
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
George Cox, 69 Oxford Place. Just a question, I guess, for the real issue with the lights.
Can you stay close to the microphone, please?
The
Yeah,
real
thank
issue
you.
for the lights is along that back, where the third field is going to go. That's the real issue there with the lights for the people that live on that street. Can that fence, and will that fence, go along the back of that third field? The third field?
This field here?
Yes.
The fence will, currently, it encompasses this northwest corner in here. It's not intended to run along this property line, although we haven't really
Because
discussed it.
that's the issue for a lot of people on the block. It's the trees that have been strip mined from that whole, we used to have a forest. Now we have a tree,
Every forest starts with a tree.
And,
I agree.
and now, it's really the trees that would be behind that third field, a fence behind that third field, that would make an issue that personally I'm not happy about, but at least would start to make it a lot of issues a little bit better for folks. And I just wondered, if that's a possibility to help people that were there first, that did enjoy a barbecue at night.
But I mean, the fence is only proposed to be 6 foot. Are you asking for a taller fence? I'm not following.
I'm asking for anything that'll block people playing, people, the noise, the cars coming in. There's going to be cars that'll, that headlights will go into my backyard from there.
I don't think headlights would.
I'm right straight back from, from.
Yeah, which house is yours?
I'm here. And this is, and this is what
You have to
I
use-
see.
You have to use the microphone.
Many of us are along here, and we see these lights over here from the field already. And it's not pleasant. As much as you talk about downturn and everything, once you see a 60-foot light up here, if you see the light, it's distracting or whatever. But you're going to have cars coming up here at 11 o'clock at night. All of a sudden, when you have 300 people here, this becomes a major road. But all of this open land here, you're not going to have a fence or trees that'll block kids from making their way back here?
So as I understand, you're concerned about the homes in this area and what they're going to see with the lights and from cars and so forth pulling into the parking area. With regards to the parking, again, I'll look at Exhibit A3. We're now going to preserve the trees in here. We're going to add more trees by transplanting some trees on site in here to fill in some gaps, and we're also going to be planting trees in here. So, and this will have a fence. So from a standpoint of a vehicle coming in on the easterly drive, that's going to be blocked by the fence and landscaping in here. With regards to the other side, the traffic's going to come in here, and it's quite a distance from here going back in a straight shot. As far as the headlights.
Yeah, but there are no trees, there are no fences. It'll be, you could see lights for
I think
a mile.
Mr. Wilkie is willing to discuss extending the fence.
Hi, I would be more than happy to look at putting a fence there. I mean, so your concern, I understand about the lights, and the other concern is what kids crossing the property line. Is that also the?
Well, you're going to have kids in this property. It's an open field.
So if we would extend the concept here on the left, A3, right? If we would extend that on the northern side as well, is that what you're suggesting?
I'm talking about the line behind the third proposed field. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand. Yeah. Leave the existing trees and then fence it like the concept here. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Yeah.
That would help.
Yes, I have no problem doing that. Yeah.
And I would just like to also mention, as Dennis just said, when we were talking to the township about getting rid of trees and the like, not taking down trees was just not an option. You know, and if there are different ways to get rid of this poison or whatever that's in the soil, I'm surprised that, you know, when you're not insisting on taking that up, you know, and going down 2 feet like the rest of the field out there. You know, there's different ways to remediate, and the one that's behind my house was strip mined, went down 12 inches, then dirt was brought in. You know, I'm surprised why that's all necessary if, you know, you can just cap it and the like, and it's just a question for you. You know,
I mean,
if
our-
taking out 12 inches of soil is the best way, then why aren't we doing the best way for a facility that, you know, we're bringing children into play on?
Our LSRP will explain how we're actually using a conservative, and he'll explain the conservative method for daycares and childcare and schools. So he'll explain if you give him a chance. You might want to ask him afterwards.
My question was, if it's the best way, why don't we do it the best
Well,
way?
again, it may determine what was in the soil next to you versus what's in the soil there. And also, the LSRP will answer the question that
I've been
you're
living
asking.
with this for 2 years, and I had you know, there were no options here, you know, that
Well,
we were told.
The LSRP will explain exactly how it's remediated, the options, and how this is the conservative method to the daycare standards and schools.
You had also mentioned that you were looking for a waiver as far as parking is concerned. I would imagine that the parking regulations are such that the main issue is safety. And when you start to take away parking spaces or space on the parking, I would imagine the bigger the parking spot, the safer it is. You know, I don't understand why you know, the waivers is just so easy when you have children in there as well. So just for consideration.
Okay.
And if I could just leave you with one more point, you know, this obviously has been going on for a long time. You know,
This being what?
this permit or this request to build the site. And I find it disappointing that, you know, I'm aware of it and the township is aware of it at the 11th hour, you know, after votes have been cast and, you know, to go forward with things like this, where obviously, you know, when you have a 70-foot building coming in, the people that live around there learn about it at the 11th hour. It just seems it could be done better for the citizens of the township to have an opportunity to review this and give our input before, you know, it's literally going for votes. Just a comment. Thank you for your
Okay.
time.
Come on up.
Glenn Watson, 22 Arthur Road. To reiterate what this gentleman just said, I couldn't agree with him anymore.
Thank you. Anyone else on the left side? Now moving to the right side. You're late.
Hey, you started on the other side. Like Helen Thomas, I'm supposed to start this time.
Susan Gulliford, Hunt Club Road, Gulliford. Okay. I want to start with the parking spaces. 794 spaces were required. The size of the spaces, they had requested a variance to make them 2 feet shorter only, not to make the width narrower.
It's not, it's a design waiver, not a variance.
I'm sorry, design waiver. And the contention is because you're allowing for the 2-foot overhang, they're really ultimately the same size. Now, for a complex like this, are most of the people is it mostly children? What age?
The operations people can testify to that.
Okay. The narrower aisle width, that was a design waiver?
Design waiver.
Okay.
Yes.
But there's not a narrower parking.
No,
No,
it's
it's just shorter.
Shorter parking and slightly narrower drive aisle.
Yeah, because the kids are going to be pouring out with their equipment. Narrower is not good.
But it's not narrower, it's shorter.
I mean, that's what I said.
Okay.
Narrower would not be a good thing, but they're keeping it the same width. But the width of the aisles going from 30 feet to 25 feet, I've attended a number of open days over at Little League. And the kids, I mean, they jump out, they've got their equipment, they're going down behind the cars there. I'm not really sure that narrowing those aisles from 30 feet to 25 feet is a great idea. I don't know how to ask this as a question. Have they looked into it as a safety factor for children?
Well, actually, that'd be a question for our traffic engineer when he
Okay.
testifies.
I wasn't sure where to go with that. The banking. You've answered some of my questions, but one of them is about where you had them, where you want to cap it. You're going to have soft dirt right now. I don't know what it's called. You're capping it with dirt, correct?
Capping it
Where
with
you're
with
banking them.
clean fill.
Yeah, where it's banking.
Correct.
So when the time came that you would request the other 160 spaces, you would be disturbing that fill in order to put in the macadam, which would then be the capping. So you would have to kind of re-clean up that whole area?
The LSRP can address that more. Sorry.
The 2 access driveways, some of it's going to be, yes, I know, some of it's going to be the traffic engineer.
Experience.
Experience. I see they're both full movement access. How far apart are those as they come out onto Mountain View?
Again, this is Exhibit A2.
360.
Okay, could you,
How far apart are the 2 exits onto Mountain View? The driveway directly that they own and the driveway coming out of the park?
between...
Right there, yes.
Between here and
Yes.
here?
Because you'd have left and rights coming out of both driveways, and it doesn't appear they're very far apart. It just seems like a traffic problem for anyone in the area.
Oh, I have a scale.
Let me get my scale.
Just to be clear, one's on Mountain View and one's on a private county access road, so.
Well, I'm thinking of it coming out onto the county access and then exiting onto Mountain. You have 2 exits coming onto Mountain View ultimately.
So what you're looking for, Susan, is the distance
between-
between the drive, the county drive into the park and
Yes.
the proposed entrance?
And their private exit, yeah.
That is approximately 420 feet.
Okay. I know, traffic engineer, we'll get to that. I can see that one coming. Now, the last time this was proposed, when they were talking about the Hillsborough Road site, they were talking about 3,000 traffic movements per day. It seems like that's going to put a lot of wear and tear on our property, on the county road that's coming out of the park. So what about maintenance, striping, macadam, the wear and tear of that many cars on a park road?
I'm going to have to...
Plowing.
Well, I'm going to have to defer to the traffic engineer with
Okay.
regards to the trips, because what you're referring to is a site that was...
Pre-considered. It was a
was
smaller
different.
site because they actually had only allowed for, I think, approximately 500 parking spaces on that one also, which of course was only 19 and a half acres anyway. Okay, we're doing well.
I just want to make sure I understand, where are you concerned about the wear and tear?
from, from where they will come out onto the park driveway, the left, yes, from there to Mountain View.
In this
Because there
section?
could be a lot of cars a day coming through there.
As far as the maintenance of the,
Maintenance, plowing, striping,
I mean, that'll be.
damage to the road.
That'll be determined by the county, so.
I mean, it's a park road, it's,
It's county property, so. it's
so it
kind
would
of-
be an agreement between them and
It
Somerset
would,
County.
it would have to be, yeah.
Okay. So, got to go to the county with that question. Okay. You did not mention the sign waiver?
The architect will be discussing
Okay.
the signs.
there
We'll
will be,
get to that.
however, if I may, there is, he'll be discussing the graphics and the size.
Okay.
But from a standpoint of, we do have one waiver that requests 2 signs. Okay?
No, I was talking about the size.
Oh, the size?
More than double the size.
Then never mind.
Okay. I have a question about accessory businesses. Many people who use these type of businesses have emphasized that it will bring money into our town. Local businesses will benefit from this operation. And it was mentioned, for example, we have the diner down there, we have a pizzeria, deli, and whatever goes into Briken eventually. But now they want to put their own food court and everything in there. Would they consider not having it in order to help local businesses? That's just a suggestion.
I think the operations people will address how it's really meant for the, and I don't want to testify, so they'll address how it's
Okay.
meant to be truly accessory.
Okay. I have a question about security. Who would be addressing that?
Operations.
Okay. Because I have a question about firefighting equipment, number of rescue squad calls. The
If you
squad,
have firefighting circulation, that would be traffic, but
okay. Okay. What about squad access to the medical offices that are listed in your main building? Is there going to be is that frequent? Again, who would handle that number?
operations.
Okay, we'll get there. The
Essentially,
dumpster-
excuse me, if he hasn't brought it up in the testimony, and the question should be based on what he said, not what you're
Okay.
fishing for. So if he hasn't said it, don't, I mean, it's pretty, I
That's why I
mean,
wasn't
this
sure where
isn't
to
your
go.
first time up here,
On the
so
road
you should
now,
know
I
this,
know.
okay? We got a lot of people that still want to go.
Okay, where is the dumpster located? I thought it was,
The dumpster is located in the northeast corner of the parking lot, and it is, again, enclosed with a solid fence. Material will be discussed with the architect, but it will also have landscaping around the,
okay, I was just wondering about the location instead of having it at the opposite end from the back of the homes on Oxford. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Hi, my name is Jessica Snowden. Last name is Snowdon. I live at 55 Oxford Place. My question is, what are the off-peak hours?
We're going to have operations testify as to the entire time of what are peak, off-peak, what a day's like, things like that.
Okay. So my next question would be the dumpster, being that it's so close to my residence and my neighbor. We both have two very young children living there, and I was just concerned about the time of the trucks going in and out. If that would be considered like early morning, because we have kids that go to school.
I believe, is there an ordinance?
There is around the amount of, the time of collection. It's the same for commercial enterprises as it is for residents, so there's.
And what time is that?
I believe it starts at 5, if I'm not mistaken.
5 a.m. That's great. Could the dumpster possibly be moved closer to Mountain View? Or to somewhere else on the property that's not going to affect?
All right, no neighbors fighting in the halls. All right,
I have no trees anymore in my yard either, so.
all right. Settle.
Moving it, moving it, where? You have a,
I was asking you. I mean, I think it's a little, it's actually a lot that is going to be affecting our properties, and to have a dumpster on top of everything else.
Tom, do you want to give the distance? And I think.
So
how
I guess
many-
she's suggesting possibly maybe moving that to the opposite corner.
moving it over here?
Yes, this way it's away from the furthest most point from the house.
The problem with over in this area is because of the proximity to the fields and bees and so forth in that area. It would be significantly closer to these fields than it would be, which home are you at?
Do you want me to just point?
Yeah, if you can just point to 38. So you're right.
So, Tom, if you could explain how many fences and trees they'd have in between?
Well, there would be, there would be the fence, the enclosure around the dumpster, the trees behind the dumpster, so you would not be able to see, you wouldn't see the dumpster at all.
Right, but my concern is actually with 2 young kids going to school at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, as far as collections?
Yeah.
It's that now for residential. I mean, for me too, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but they come at 5:15.
Well, I understand that I now basically have 2 front yards, so.
How far away is the dumpster from the backyards of the houses? Like in feet approximately? Like, just to put it in perspective.
From lot 37, it's approximately 340 feet, and from lot 38, you're looking at approximately 490.
Does that make it better? I mean, it's a long distance.
Not really, but I guess. The environmental meeting, we were told 50-foot lights with operation hours up to 10 p.m. Now we're being told that it's closing at 11. Does anybody have answers to that?
I can say we did not have our operations people. That was an
I'm sorry,
estimate
the environmental.
at the Environmental Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Robert Darby, D-A-R-B-Y, 51 Oxford. You were asking earlier about the buffer. In my preference, I would much rather see the mature trees up than have to wait the 20 years for the 8-some foot trees to come and actually fill in. I mean, if and at all possible, maybe like you were talking earlier about sending along the north to complete the complete north line of the property. If and at all possible. I mean, it might make.
Try and talk into the
Oh,
microphone if you
sorry.
could.
It might be easier to move some of the trees. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing.
Okay.
But yeah, I would much rather have that buffer than a berm with an 8-foot tree on top.
Understood. Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
James Burke, B-U-R-K-E, 121 Mountain View Road. We're about we are 3 houses away on the, let's see, the project side going into the complex on Mountain View. So we would be to the north of the entrance, 3 houses on the map to the left.
To the east, you're saying, right?
Yeah. So we would be somewhere right here. So my question is, on the east boundary of the trees, is all them trees are were removed, I should say, because I believe they're putting in a drain going out to the road on the map to the left. Yeah, right there. Will there be any additional trees put in along that boundary?
There are currently no trees proposed along that boundary because the buffer that's required is where you abut a residentially zoned property or residential use. And this property in here is not it's not zoned as residential, and it's not currently residential.
Gotcha.
It's between, you're at 2411, you're like right here?
Yeah, we're
Or-
like
or
the
over-
third house. The third house.
Over here.
Yes.
That's why, because there's no buffering required over here because it's not abutting a residential.
Gotcha. Also, this might be for the planning board question. Is there any plans in the future for Pleasant View from Mountain View to be extended into the park area, or Pleasant View from Amwell Road to be extended into the park area?
Sorry,
We're not aware of it.
Not that I'm aware of, yeah.
Pleasant View.
If you want to give him the mic, Tom.
Pleasant View's, yeah, right here. Is there any, I'm sorry. Is there any plans for Pleasant View, because I know it shows it on the township map from years ago, but it never really existed, but is there any plans for this to go through and connect into the park, or vice versa from Amwell Road into the park in the future?
No plans that we're aware of at this time, but it's not before the board, and it's not before the township committee that I'm aware of.
So,
The fact that it's a paper street, there are a number of paper streets all over town that are never going to.
Well, I know the bit of the concern was with the driveways being so close. It is pretty close, but I don't see really another way to do it with this design. And I just want to say that I'm for the project. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings. There is an issue with the dump trucks going up and down the road. But when this thing is completed, I think it's going to be good for the community. I know there's some growing pains, and I understand Oxford Drive, their concerns. But I'm for it. But like I said, I think it would alleviate some of the pressure on Mountain View Road in the future if Pleasant View, either from Montgomery side, goes through to the park, or from Amwell Road side, maybe from Amwell Road, like the park closes at dusk, the county park, maybe you could close that road, at dusk to alleviate some of the pressure through the neighborhood in the future. Because, and I'm sure the bypass will, I'm told will help out also. I don't know. But that's it for me. Thank you.
thanks, Mr. Rowe.
I'm John Anderson from 49 Oxford Place. Just want to reiterate what Robert Darby, my neighbor, said. But basically, I also want to clarify that the buffer zone that goes along the north border there is stopping just short of giving me a break. So if it can extend all the way to the east border of the proposed project area, that would help me out a lot. I know it's going to cost you more money, but does that seem feasible?
So you're proposing going down the length of the back of the property all the way to the east, is what you're talking about?
We just put up this other, is that? So, Mr. Anderson, you're suggesting continuing this buffer? The only reason, and I know we had talked about that, the only reason why we're showing it stopping here is there's no trees along here. these are far enough away. And down in this area, there's no organized use for this area. There's not really any, I mean, and the operations are going to talk about it. This may be for warm-up for kids that are going to be on the turf fields. But when I was looking at it again today, thought if we put up that fence, that would help the concern about children back and forth.
That fence, the north fence as opposed to the south fence on the other side of the buffer, that's the solid fence?
Yeah, but we could continue the solid fence here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I am concerned about also the dumpster area, and the visualization from my property to the dumpster would be nice to block that as much as we can.
Right, and that's, oh, you're block 177.
I think
Yeah.
Mr. Decker testified you'll have the fencing around the dumpster area itself, then landscape plantings, then another fence, then trees growing in that area in between again. So there will, I think he testified that there will be lots of buffering.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, so it's 10:10 now. I don't think there's any other questions here. So we're going to, I guess, we don't start any new testimony, so I guess we'll have to, when's our next scheduled date, David, that we can have a continuance?
We have a meeting on April 20th, but we already have 2 applications on that. The next empty agenda is May 3rd.
Okay, so May 3rd, to those in the public, we're looking at, make sure that they can make it. Please stand by.
Meeting next.
May 3rd is fine.
Without notice?
Mr. Chairman, the motion being sought is a continuation of this meeting until, this application until May 3rd, 2018, without further notice, as is the policy of this board on all other applications.
Absolutely. So we will take a motion to have a continuance to May 3rd.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we will move to a continuance on May 3rd. For all those in the public, there will be no notification, so make sure you put it on your calendars or tell your friends. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so a little bookkeeping here.
Motion to adjourn.
We'll now we have a next scheduled meeting for April 12th, which would be at
We
7:30.
do have applications, so
And we-
if we're
and we
gonna-
do have an
anybody's gonna be
application.
missing, let us know.
And if you're not going to make it, please let us know. So that I will
Somebody else will probably.
enter a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn, Chairman?
Second? All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.